the Nonprofit Podcast, powered by DonorBox.
Ever felt like your nonprofit is on the brink of something big, but you're not quite sure how to take that next step? You are not alone. Growing a nonprofit is about more than just ambition. It's about strategy, resilience, and perhaps knowing when to pivot. Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Jena, Education and Community Engagement Manager here at DonorBox. We are here each week with practical actions you can use today to increase donations and take your nonprofit to the next level tomorrow. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Megan Heber, Professor of Practice in Arts Management and Nonprofit Leadership at SMU's Division of Corporate Communication and Public Affairs. Megan brings over 15 years of experience using the arts to drive positive change. She is deeply involved in the North Texas arts community, serving on various committees and boards. With an impressive background spanning across academia, nonprofit leadership, and military service, Megan's insights promise to be invaluable as we explore practical strategies to help your nonprofit navigate the stages of growth effectively. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much. Thrilled to be here.
Now, before we dive in, I would love if you could share with us just a little insight into your journey that led you into the world of arts management and nonprofit leadership and what inspired you to pursue this path.
Well, I like to tell my students often that when I was sitting in their chairs, I had no idea that a career in nonprofits or arts management even existed. That was something I totally stumbled into, but I'm so glad to have taken that fall because it changed the pathway in my entire life. So I started my career aspirations thinking that I would be a music teacher. Specifically, I thought I would be teaching high school band. I am a trained clarinetist, and I went to undergrad to do that at Rowan University, which is a small public university right outside of Philadelphia in South New Jersey. And I had been really focused on how music and the arts and now nonprofits can be used to really transform people's lives. It's about living this deeper, fuller life, and how lucky are we that we get to focus on that mission and focus on bettering other people's lives. So I did my music education career. I finished my degree, and at that time, it was 2008. So economic crisis was going on, no jobs were getting posted, and I was in a bit of a panic with graduation coming. Luckily, I had a great mentor. His name was Dr. John Paston, who was the director of bands for Rowan University. And I was talking to him about all of this. Like, I don't know what's next for me. I thought I was going to do this one career path. I don't see any jobs posted. I don't know how long recovery is going to take. What should I do? So he was the retired conductor for the Navy Band in Washington, D.C., and recommended to me to take an audition for the military. He said, I think you're good enough to win an audition. It would be a 5-year commitment. You'd get stability. You'd get to travel around the world, which at that point, I had only been born in New Jersey, raised in New Jersey, college in New Jersey, everything in New Jersey. So that sounds pretty interesting. So I took an audition, won the spot, and about 4 months after undergraduate graduation, I shipped off to Navy boot camp in Great Lakes and spent my 5 years in the military getting to serve our country by performing as a musician. I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. I was stationed in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii for 3 years, and then my last duty station was in New Orleans, Louisiana. And it was during that time that I really fell in love with arts administration, again, accidentally, totally by accident. The units in the Navy are what we call self-sufficient units. So we don't have a team who's doing operations or finance or marketing or project management. That all is assigned to you as a collateral duty in addition to your playing responsibilities. So I very quickly realized that I liked doing everything else that everybody hated. So everyone else hated or loved going out on performances and gigs, and I love a Sousa March, but after a couple hundred times playing it, I found a lot of joy and interest and purpose doing all of the administrative tasks that made it possible for everybody to go out and do these performances. So that's when the light bulb kind of went off and said, oh, I might not necessarily be a career professional musician. I might actually be the one who helps make all of that happen, who helps support artists and culture and nonprofits. So that light bulb had gone off, my enlistment ended, and I realized that that was probably the next career step for me. So that's how I stumbled into it. Luckily, University of North Texas hired me right after my enlistment ended to manage their performing arts center. And my career in nonprofits really took off at that time. I was able to go back and get some additional education, doing an MA and MBA from Southern Methodist University, where I am now so privileged to lead the programs I once went through. Spent about 5 years being executive director of a medium-sized arts education nonprofit in Dallas, and learned, as many of your listeners probably feel, how you have to be a generalist for so many different things, and how you have to know finance and marketing and budgeting and then board governance, and all of these really varied tasks are required to really run your organization strongly. So spent 5 years doing that as executive director, and then Southern Methodist University reached out to me. I had been doing a couple of adjunct and positions before that during COVID, fell in love with teaching again, especially at the collegiate level. And then they offered me a position to run their graduate programs and also teach in their undergraduate arts and nonprofit leadership. So that's a little bit about how I fell into this career and totally fell into it. Would never have known it was an option for me, or that 15, 20 years ago, this is where I would be sitting.
I think that is quite a journey. So how do you see how these experiences have shaped your understanding of organizational growth and scalability? That's what we're here to talk about today is, there are so many different life cycles of a nonprofit organization, and you've seen them from many different sides, and would love to hear your experience with that.
Well, first I want to say it all makes sense in hindsight, but just so your listeners, in case they're ever feeling like, I don't know the next step, I don't know what to do, I don't know if this decision is the right decision, I felt every one of those at every transition point. Lots of tears happened, lots of trepidation about the next choice, and it's worked out really beautifully and makes sense when I look back, but I remember being so unsure of where my next journey or step would be. And I think that's the same too for organizations, especially when they're starting out and you have a passion, you have something that you really want to improve in your community, and you start an incredible nonprofit organization, but then all of a sudden you're thinking about scaling and growth and next steps, and it can feel really overwhelming. I've worked for organizations and led organizations with $1 million plus budgets, but I've also worked on organizations where the board is the ones in the trenches. I've filled out those the 501c3 application forms and do those finances every week as a volunteer board member. So I think that's one of the beautiful things about our sector is that there are so many varieties of how your organization can work, and the management and governance can really interplay with each other. And there's no right size, right answer. But I think what happens is we see other organizations, see what they're doing, and we're like, oh, are we supposed to be doing that? When is the right time for that? What is the next step for all of us? And we can get filled with a lot of overwhelming feelings about that. So one of the things that my students and I talk a lot about is that organizational life cycle for nonprofits of you start as a founder with this incredible idea, and then you have to be a startup organization. You have to figure out how to pay those first bills. You have to figure out what your next program is going to be and how to bring in these collaborations. From there, you go into that growth cycle. So you're scaling, you're building, hopefully you're hiring and paying yourself at that point until you reach that maturity level. And then most organizations at some point in some way we'll have a crisis point, or we'll have some sort of renewal opportunity, a transformational opportunity, and some survive that, and some organizations also don't. So that turnaround period, and then hopefully getting back into that growth cycle and that maturity level of an organization. So I think when we think about all of these life cycles, you might also have different parts of your organizations at different life cycles at the same time. So thinking about boards, for example, we love boards, we hate boards sometimes. It's a combination of all of those things. And what I've seen is sometimes there's just a misunderstanding of where the organization is in the life cycle between the staff for the board or even the beneficiaries. So when you think about life cycles, if you think about, well, where is my programming right now? Are we still in a growth mindset? Are we still in a startup mindset? Are we fully mature and we're established and we've got things really handled well? We can also think about finances too. I'm sure most, if not all of us, have done that cash accounting because it's easy, it's simple, it makes a lot of intuitive sense to us. But then as we think about growing and getting into a more mature organization, that importance of accrual accounting, especially with recognizing a grants receivable and being able to have an audit so that we are able to apply for bigger grants. That's, again, part of that life cycle. So I've used a lot Social Impact Architects, and Suzanne Smith is CEO and founder. She has a wonderful resource on her website with the organizational cycles and a bunch of different categories that we use often in my classes to really figure out, where do we think we are? Again, you might be in one category for one part of your operations and another category for another part of your operations. I find it's a really good tool, too, to see if there's alignment in your organization. So having members of your board fill out and say, where do you think we are life cycle-wise for all these different categories? Having the staff do that, having your beneficiaries. And when you look at all the responses, you might be surprised that people think you're in different life cycles than what you might have thought. And I think that tool can be really great for a strategic planning process of where is the alignment and where is there the misalignment. It could really showcase how to communicate to your board or to your beneficiaries. Maybe they think you're at a higher level or a lower level than the organization is at, and that disconnect can show you, well, maybe we have to talk about that a little bit more and demonstrate how we are at that level or we're not at that level yet. So it's a really good tool to kind of get an organization unified. It also, I found, thinking about life cycle, lets you sleep better at night. And I think we all need to sleep better at night. There's nothing worse, as many of us have probably experienced, that panic of looking at your bank account and knowing you may or may not make payroll at the end of the month, having to call donors, having to get those resources you need. So when you think about life cycle and next steps and strategic planning, that helps you make those decisions and those choices to get to the next level. So I recommend always for organizations to take a look at the descriptions for each category at the level that they think they are, and then look at the next level up. What would it take to get to the next level? So if your marketing you feel like is still kind of in the startup, maybe you don't have anyone full-time who's doing marketing, maybe you don't have a brand identity guide yet. For development, maybe you don't really have any of your call to actions really clear yet, or maybe you need more of that development materials. Well, look at that and know it's okay to be in have to improve on something. Like, that's okay. Look at the next step up in the organizational life cycle and what could you aspire to be? How would you be able to get from where you are now to where you want to be? So that's some of the ways I've used the life cycle training. That's one of the ways I've used life cycles in the past, and I find it a valuable tool for all members of an organization, whether staff or volunteers or the board itself.
It's such good advice to look at the pieces of the organization in those different departments. And I think for an executive director who is a team of one or a team of two plus their board, and they're wearing all the different hats. It's so easy to want to put it all in one bucket and evaluate it all at once, right? So I think that's incredibly helpful. So for organizations who have never done this type of evaluation to even know, I don't even know what life cycle I'm in, right? I don't know if my departments are aligned on the same level. Where would you suggest they start?
Well, hopefully, one of my projects I'm working on this summer is to build out some really detailed checklists for all of these different categories. Suzanne Smith, as I mentioned on Social Impact Architects, I'm sure we can provide the link for your listeners. That's a great place to start because it's pretty manageable. She breaks it down with impact, with brand, with revenue, operations and culture, and your governance, and then also describes in each life cycle stage what are some of the adjectives that might show you're in that stage. Then you can go through and I print it out. I circle where I think I am in each of those categories, what life cycle stage. I ask my board, I ask other stakeholders to do the same. Then looking at it for patterns of, do we all think we're in this category here? Do we all think that we're in this category here? And then what's that next step up? So what is, if we are in the growth phase right now, what would a mature organization look like? What kind of adjectives are being described for a mature organization? I think back to the point of helping us all sleep better at night, it can be so overwhelming when you're thinking about life cycle as the full organization. That's hard. How do you fix or how do you improve or how do you increase your impact in all of these different categories? But chunking it and breaking it down becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot more digestible and a lot more feasible that you can make progress on little steps instead of the whole piece of the pie. So that's one of the ways that I suggest people to approach this, is not as a full organization as a whole, but as all these little pieces. And only pick one or two to start with. You don't have to make improvements and get everything into the mature stage all at once. This is a really good way to spend a year or 2 years or 3 years about thinking about the next step and also knowing what is the next step. Because so often we don't even know of what would a more mature organization that's similar to mine look like.
I think that you've brought up a really good question. And I was just about to ask, setting a timeline for things like this is so important, right? To hold yourself accountable, to make sure that you're tracking your goals and you're making them very specific and measurable. So say an organization wants to move from one phase to another. Okay, we want to get this done in a year. We want to move from this emerging to this mature nonprofit model. How would you recommend that they set specific measurable goals to reach that next phase of their nonprofit?
I love gap analysis of where are we right now? Where do we want to be in a future time frame? And whether that's 1 year, being really specific about it. Are we talking 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year? Because we are just one people and we want to be mindful of our own time and capacity. So not taking on everything at once. But an example of it would be, say you are scaling up your development grant applications, and you've been noticing some of the larger grants require that audit. And with the generally accepted accounting principles gap, a lot of organizations cannot get an audit, not a full audit, without using accrual accounting. So knowing that you want to apply for these bigger grants, then backtracking it and saying, okay, well, what do I need in place to be able to apply for those bigger grants? One of them being an audit. Then backtracking that, okay, what do I need to have in place to do this audit? Well, I need to be using accrual accounting. Okay, then backtrack it more. If we're using cash accounting, what kind of transition would that look like? What kind of additional resources would we need, or training for our staff? I think training is something we overlook a lot in nonprofits because the money is scarce. The money is really scarce, and we're so protective about having as many dollars as we can go to programs and impact and mission. But sometimes investing a little bit in training can also help us fill in these gaps. So keeping with that example, well, okay, what do we need to get in place for that transition from cash accounting to accrual accounting? And then what kind of timeline would that look like? So then you could do that flip from cash accounting to accrual accounting, which makes you eligible to do your audit, which will make you eligible to do those bigger dollar grants. So thinking about it in a process-based gap analysis like that.
Of course, there is no one size fits all. And I think that it's really validating what you said at the beginning. It's so different for each organization, and it's so easy to compare and look at other organizations. And that might not be where your organization needs to go, right? And being able to step back, evaluate, and make sure you have a clear vision of what that means for your specific mission, for your specific community that you are serving, makes all the difference. Before we wrap up our conversation, any final thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with?
I think one thing I'd like to leave with the listeners is, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling unsure of what the next step is, always take that step back and remember every nonprofit started as an idea. It started with someone's vision. It started with that mission-driven work. And there's steps. It's okay to not be a fully massive $10 million organization right at the beginning. Baby steps are okay. And just like real human life, we need them. We need them to learn and build capabilities and build resources. So if you're feeling overwhelmed about what is the next step for my organization, look at the life cycle option to really break down the different categories of what we're doing and what it would look like to take it to the next level. I'm hoping to publish soon in the next year or so very detailed checklists of all of these things. So really looking at finance and having 50 indicators there of, okay, what are we doing now? How would this look like? Or with your programming or marketing or governance too, because governance changes, as we all know. We might start with boards who are doing the work and in the trenches, in the operations, and need to be because they're the only ones who are doing the work. And then that transition out into more of a governance board. That really reflects well in life cycles. So if you're struggling with any of that, or if you just need some additional support or ideas about the next step to scaling, I love using the life cycles to help frame the conversations about next steps.
Baby steps are okay.
Baby steps are great.
Well, I think whether it's adapting fundraising strategies, marketing strategies, or reimagining organizational structures, every decision you make can really shape the path ahead. So as you continue on your journey, embrace that process of growth and be open to that change. Be resilient in the face of these challenges. Know that there can be a process to navigate your way through it, and always be guided by your mission. So thank you, Megan, for sharing your insights with us today. And once you do have those things published, we've got to have you back on.
I would love to. It was totally my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on the Nonprofit Podcast. I hope you've left with the confidence to take a small step today that will make a big difference tomorrow. Be sure to click the download button on your podcast player, then leave the Nonprofit Podcast a review or give it a thumbs up if you're listening to the Nonprofit Podcast on YouTube. Your review is a great way to help others find us. You're here to help others. We're here to help you. Until next time, stay inspired.
That warm feeling when you help someone, it's not just happiness, it's fulfillment. And we believe it should be available to everyone, from frontline heroes to first-time fundraisers. Our tools empower you to help others. This is our mission. This is DonorBox, helping you help others.